My husband publicly humiliated me in front of his entire company. They laughed for exactly 17 seconds. I counted every single one. That night, when he came home drunk and triumphant, his key didn't work. The locks were changed. What the neighbor told him in that hallway would haunt him forever. But that was just the beginning of how I systematically dismantled the life he thought he controlled. If you've ever been made to feel small by someone who claimed to love you, this story is for you. Hit that like button right now because what you're about to hear is the most calculated, satisfying takedown you'll witness this year. And trust me, you'll want to hear every single second. I was wearing burgundy the night my marriage ended. Not the soft, romantic burgundy of wine by candlelight, but the deep, blood-dark burgundy of a dress I'd spent too much money on because Carter said it made me look powerful. The same dress I was now standing frozen in, champagne flute trembling in my hand, while my husband's words hung in the decorated conference room like a public execution. Stop acting like you own me. Ruby. His voice carried over the jazz quartet, over the clink of glasses, over the murmur of his 20 colleagues who had all turned to watch this performance. You don't get to tell me where I go or who I'm with. The laughter started small. Brad from sales, always Carter's loyal audience. Then it spread. Stephanie from accounting tried to hide her smile behind her hand. David from IT actually snorted into his whiskey. The sound grew and multiplied until it felt like the entire room was laughing at me. This stupid wife who dared to question why her husband was 3 hours late to his own company's holiday party. 17 seconds. I counted every one of them while my face burned and my throat closed, and something inside me, something that had been bending for 14 years, finally snapped clean in. Half. Carter turned away from me then, raising his glass to Brad like they'd just won something. Like humiliating your wife in public was an achievement worth celebrating. The two of them clinked their glasses together, and I saw it in that gesture. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned, rehearsed. Carter had wanted an audience for this particular cruelty. I should have left right then. Should have thrown my champagne in his face or made a scene or done any of the dramatic things that feel satisfying in the moment, but change nothing in the long run. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was the smile you give when you're in so much pain that your face doesn't know what else to do. The smile that keeps you from crying in front of people who would enjoy your tears. I set down my champagne flute with steady hands, excused myself to the restroom, and stood in front of the mirror for 5 full minutes, watching my reflection and making a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to give him any reaction at all. I was going to destroy him. The thing about marriages that die slowly is that you can usually pinpoint the exact moment when you stopped being partners and became something else entirely. For us, it was probably 3 years ago, when Carter got his MBA and suddenly started treating our relationship like a merger he regretted. But I hadn't seen it clearly until tonight. Standing in that bathroom, mascara somehow still perfect despite the tears I'd held back, I finally understood what I'd become in Carter's eyes: an obstacle. An asset he could leverage, a checkbook with legs and a signature he needed for his next big scheme. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from my brother Marcus. You good? Saw Carter being loud at the bar earlier. Marcus worked security at corporate events. Of course he'd seen. Of course he'd known something was wrong before I did. I'm fine, I typed back. Heading home soon. Then I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to a name I'd saved 6 months ago, when some part of me, the part that still had survival instincts, knew I might need it someday. Alexandra Chen, divorce attorney. My finger hovered over the call button. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Friday night. Professional boundaries existed, but something in me knew that if I didn't make this call right now, while my rage was still hot and pure, I might talk myself out of it by morning. I pressed call. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice alert despite the late hour. Alexandra Chen. My name is Ruby Thorne, I said, and it felt significant somehow to use my maiden name. My husband just humiliated me in front of his entire company. I need to know my options for divorce. There was a brief pause, then her voice came back warmer, more human. Are you safe right now? Physically? Yes, emotionally. I laughed and it came out bitter. I'll survive. Good, that's the right answer. Survival first, revenge second. I heard papers rustling in the background. I can see you Monday at noon. In the meantime, I need you to do 3 things. First, don't tell him you're considering divorce. Second, start documenting everything. Texts, emails, financial records, anything that shows a pattern of behavior. Third, and this is important, find out what he's hiding. What makes you think he's hiding something? Ruby, men who humiliate their wives in public are always hiding something. The cruelty is usually a smokescreen. She paused, or a distraction from guilt. We talked for another 10 minutes. She explained retainer fees and legal strategy and the approximate timeline for a contested divorce in Minnesota, but what stuck with me most was something she said near the end of the call. The best revenge isn't anger, Ruby. It's precision. I hung up and stared at my reflection again. The woman looking back at me wasn't the same one who'd walked into this party 3 hours ago. That woman had been trying to salvage something already dead. This woman was planning a resurrection. My phone buzzed again. Carter this time. Where are you? We're leaving in 5, no apology. No acknowledgement of what had just happened. Just a command disguised as information, like I was an employee he needed to manage. I typed back, in the bathroom. Meet you at the car. Then I deleted Alexandra's number from my recent calls, cleared my browser history, and walked back into that conference room with my head high and my smile fixed in place. Carter was exactly where I'd left him, holding court with Brad and 2 clients I didn't recognize. He didn't look up when I approached, didn't acknowledge my presence until I touched his arm lightly. Ready when you are, I said, voice pleasant and empty. He glanced at me with mild surprise, like he'd expected a fight and was suspicious of my calm. Give me 10 minutes. Wrapping something up. Of course. I stood there beside him, silent and smiling, while he talked about quarterly projections and market opportunities, playing the role of supportive wife for an audience that had just watched him tear me apart. And the whole time, I was calculating. Our apartment was in my name. My father's inheritance had paid the down payment. My consulting business covered the monthly fees. Carter contributed nothing financially to our home, yet somehow over the years it had become our apartment in conversation. His view, his success story, not anymore. By the time we finally left, I had the bones of a plan forming. It would require precision, timing, and most importantly, absolute secrecy. Carter couldn't suspect anything until it was too late to stop it. We drove home in silence, Carter scrolling through his phone with the focus of someone already forgetting I existed. At one red light, I glanced over and saw he was texting someone named Steve about Tuesday's meeting, except Carter didn't have any clients named Steve, and we both knew he spent every Tuesday afternoon supposedly at the gym. Who's Steve? I asked casually. His thumb moved lightning fast, closing the app. Client. New acquisition Brad's bringing in. Ah. The lie sat between us like a third passenger for the rest of the drive. When we got home, Carter headed straight for the bedroom, already stripping off his tie. I'm exhausted. Don't wake me up when you come to bed. I won't. I stood in our living room, my living room, and looked at the Minneapolis skyline through our floor-to-ceiling windows. 19 floors up, the city looked peaceful, orderly, like everything made sense from a distance. But up close I could see the cracks. I made myself tea and sat at the kitchen counter, pulling out my laptop. If Alexandra was right about men who humiliate their wives publicly, then Carter was hiding something, and I had until Monday to figure out what. I started with our joint credit card statements, the ones Carter always insisted on handling himself. You're too busy with your business, babe. I'll take care of the boring money stuff. Took me 40 minutes to find the login. Credentials. He'd saved them in a document labeled Golf Scores. 2023. Not exactly master criminal. Behavior. The statements loaded, month by month of our shared financial life. And there it was, every Tuesday for the past 7 months, the Marriott downtown. Same charge, $247.50. Hotel room rate plus parking. My hands went cold. 7 months of Tuesday afternoons. 7 months of the gym. 7 months of coming home with wet hair that smelled like hotel shampoo, not chlorine. I kept scrolling, looking for other patterns. And I found them, jewelry purchases from Tiffany's, none of which I'd ever received. Dinner charges at expensive restaurants on nights Carter claimed to be working late. Uber rides to addresses I didn't recognize. But it was the Venmo transactions that made my stomach drop. Monthly payments to someone named SM, $800 each time. The memo line always said the same thing. For expenses, Stephanie Mills, from accounting. The blonde who'd laughed behind her hand tonight while Carter humiliated me. He was paying her $800 a month for expenses. I sat there in my kitchen at 11:47 p.m., staring at proof of my husband's affair, and I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel surprised. I felt free. Because this wasn't just grounds for divorce. This was ammunition. This was leverage. This was exactly what I needed to make sure Carter walked away from our marriage with nothing but his expensive suits and his expensive lies. I screenshot everything. Every hotel charge, every suspicious dinner, every Venmo payment. Then I uploaded it all to a secure cloud drive that only I could access. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "You sure you're okay? That scene at the party looked rough." I stared at his message for a long moment before responding. "I'm better than okay," I typed. "I'm done being afraid." His response came immediately. "About fucking time. What do you need?" And that's when I realized something crucial. I wasn't alone in this. I had Marcus. I had Alexandra. I had evidence and legal standing, and most importantly, I had clarity. Carter had spent 14 years making me doubt myself, making me feel small, making me believe that his success was somehow mine to maintain. But he'd made one critical mistake tonight. He'd humiliated me publicly enough to kill any guilt I might have felt about what came next. I texted Marcus back. "I need a storage unit. Big enough for a man's entire life. Can you set that up?" "Done. I'll have keys for you by tomorrow afternoon." "Ruby, yeah? I'm proud of you." I set down my phone and looked around the apartment. This space that had felt like a prison for so long suddenly felt like a fortress. My fortress, with my locks and my rules and my name on the deed. Carter thought tonight's humiliation was his declaration of independence. He had no idea he'd just signed his own eviction notice. I pulled out a business card I'd been carrying, in my wallet for 6 months, ever, since a locksmith had changed the building's master system and left her contact information with every resident. Diana Pierce, 24-hour emergency locksmith service. The tagline on her card read, "We secure what matters most." I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the late hour. "Diana Pierce, locksmith." "Hi Diana, my name is Ruby Thorne. I live at the Millennium Tower, apartment 19F. I need my locks changed tonight." There was a pause, then a knowing sigh. "Husband? How did you know?" "Because women who call me after midnight are always taking back their homes." I heard keys jingling in the background. "I can be there in 40 minutes. But Ruby, once I change those locks, there's no going back." "You sure you're ready?" I looked toward the bedroom where Carter was sleeping, oblivious and entitled, dreaming whatever dreams men who cheat on their wives have. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. "Good answer. See you soon." I hung up and made myself another cup of tea, this time adding honey, celebrating in my own quiet way, the end of one life and the beginning of another. At 12:31 a.m., Diana arrived with her toolkit and a knowing smile that said she'd seen this exact scenario 100 times before. She was maybe 50, with silver-streaked dark hair and the kind of calm competence that comes from years of helping women reclaim their spaces. She knelt by my front door and examined the existing lock with the focused attention of a surgeon studying an X-ray. "Commercial. Grade," she muttered. "Good bones, but standard issue." "Your husband ever upgrade the security?" "No. Men like him never do." She pulled out her tools, metal singing against metal. They never think anyone would dare lock them out. As she worked, I started phase 2 of my midnight operation. Packing Carter's belongings. Every item required examination, judgment, disposal planning. His Harvard MBA diploma, 3 months of my consulting fees that paid for his executive education, went into bubble wrap. I wrote on the box with a Sharpie, "Educated but not enlightened." The Rolex I'd bought him for our 10th anniversary went into its original box with a note. Time's up. His collection of first edition business books became unread trophies, the golf clubs he'd bought with what he called his bonus, but was actually our tax refund. Borrowed dreams. Then, behind his golf bag in the closet, I found something that stopped me cold. A pink cashmere scarf. Expensive, soft, reeking of perfume that definitely wasn't mine. I held it up to the light, evidence of Tuesday afternoons I'd pretended not to know about. But instead of rage, I felt something closer to vindication. I folded it carefully, placed it in its own box, and labeled it Tuesday afternoons. Personal property of your accounting department. Diana appeared in the bedroom doorway, new keys dangling from her fingers. All done. Military-grade deadbolts can't be duplicated at any corner shop. You want copies made, you come through me. She handed me the keys. Heavier than the old ones, with edges that bit into my palm like promise. These are perfect. You need help moving boxes? Before I could answer, there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole and saw Harold, our building's night doorman, standing with a utility dolly. I opened the door. Harold? Miss Thorne, he said, using my maiden name without prompting. I brought extra boxes from storage. The good ones. Figured you might need them. My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. How did you know? He met my eyes directly. Because I've worked here 15 years and I see everything. Your husband thinks because he tips well at Christmas, gives me Celtics tickets sometimes, that I'm blind. But I'm not. He wheeled the dolly inside and started loading boxes without being asked. Harold, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He adjusted a box, not meeting my eyes. Every Tuesday when you're at Pilates, that woman from his office comes here, takes the service elevator, stays exactly 90 minutes. The information should have hurt, but instead it just felt like confirmation. How long? 6 months, maybe 7. He finally looked at me, anger flashing in his usually kind eyes. Started right after your father's funeral. You deserve better than a man who can't even cheat with dignity. At least have the decency to go to a hotel. We worked in silence after that. Harold and Diana and me. 3 people who understood that sometimes the middle of the night is when real change happens. By 2:15 a.m., every trace of Carter had been boxed, labeled, and moved to the hallway. The apartment looked different, lighter somehow, like we'd removed furniture that had been blocking airflow. I sat at my laptop, crafting the email that would serve as both evidence and announcement. The subject line read, Transparency and Truth, a necessary update. The body of the email was surgical. To friends, family, and colleagues. I'm writing to inform you that my marriage to Carter Lawson has ended, effective immediately. This decision follows his public humiliation of me at last night's company event, which many of you witnessed. For those interested in the complete story, I've attached security footage from the party, credit card statements showing hotel charges every Tuesday for 7 months, Venmo payments to his mistress, text message evidence of his affair. I'm sharing this not out of spite, but because Carter has spent years controlling the narrative about our marriage. This is my truth, fully documented. I wish him well in his future endeavors, just not in my apartment or my life. Best regards. Ruby Thorne. The recipient list was comprehensive. Both sets of parents, his boss, our entire friend circle, his HR department, and, because I was feeling particularly thorough, the company's board of directors. My finger hovered over the schedule send button. 3 a.m. seemed right. Late enough that Carter would be locked out and desperate, early enough that people would read it with their morning coffee. I pressed send, watching the confirmation appear. Email scheduled successfully. Diana packed up her tools, giving me a card with her personal number. First night's always the hardest. You'll want to undo it all, go back to the familiar pain. Don't. Tomorrow you'll wake up and realize the air tastes different when you're not suffocating. Harold finished stacking the last box. I'll be at my desk all night, Miss Thorne, if you need anything. After they left, I stood in my hallway surrounded by boxes containing Carter's life, my phone in hand, new keys heavy and real in my pocket. The apartment behind me was mine now. Legally, it always had been, but now it felt true. At exactly 2:28 a.m., I heard a door open down the hall. Through my new peephole, I watched Margaret Henderson emerge from 19G, wearing an emerald silk robe. Carrying a silver tea service like midnight visits were perfectly routine. She was the retired judge who'd lived next door for 20 years. We'd exchanged pleasantries in the elevator, but never had a real conversation. Until now. She paused at the boxes lining the hallway, reading my labels with the careful attention of someone appraising evidence. Her fingers traced the words, Tuesday afternoons, and a knowing smile crossed her face. She knocked on my door with 3 precise taps. "Miss Thorne," she said when I opened the door. "I believe we have some time before the main event. Would you join me for tea?" Margaret Henderson's apartment was a time capsule of old money and earned respect. Book-lined walls held legal volumes mixed with first editions of classic literature. Oriental rugs softened hardwood floors that probably cost more per square foot than most people's cars. The furniture whispered of inheritance and taste. The kind of pieces that appreciate in value while their owners appreciate in wisdom. She poured Earl Grey from a silver service that looked like it belonged in a museum, her movements precise and unhurried despite the late hour. "I was a judge for 30 years, Margaret said, handing me a delicate china cup, presided over every kind of human cruelty you can imagine. But the cases that haunted me weren't the dramatic ones, the crimes of passion or sudden violence. It was the slow erosion, the daily diminishment disguised as marriage." She settled into a wingback chair that had probably witnessed decades of her legal strategy sessions. "That's the worst kind of cruelty, Ruby, because it teaches you to be complicit in your own destruction." She moved to an antique secretary desk and pulled out a manila folder, thick with papers and photographs. My heart started racing before she even opened it. "I started documenting your husband's activities 6 months ago," Margaret said, spreading the contents across her mahogany coffee table. "Not out of nosiness, you understand. Out of concern." The photographs had timestamps, dates carefully noted in her precise handwriting. October 15th, 2024. 1:17 p.m. Subject. SM enters building via main entrance October 15th, 2024, 1:27 p.m. Subject. CL enters via parking garage October 15th, 2024, 2:43 p.m. Both subjects exit separately every Tuesday for 6 months, documented with the thoroughness of someone who understood how truth needed evidence to become justice. "Why?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. Margaret's eyes softened. "Because I was you once. 40 years ago, different husband, same story. But back then, nobody documented anything. Nobody helped. Women just disappeared into their marriages, and nobody asked questions until they turned up in my courtroom. Broken and without proof." She touched one of the photographs. Carter in the lobby, checking his phone. Trying to look casual. I promised myself I'd never let another woman go through that alone. Not if I could help it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her gift settling over me like armor. "He doesn't know about these?" "Nobody knows. I used my balcony, perfect angle on the lobby entrance. Telephoto lens from my court security days." She smiled slightly. "Some skills you never lose." At 2:47 a.m., we heard the elevator ding. Margaret moved to her door with practiced ease, pressing her eye to the peephole. "He's here." Through the fisheye lens, I watched Carter stumble down the hallway, his gait uneven from alcohol and arrogance. He'd obviously stopped somewhere between the party and home, working up the courage for round 2 of whatever performance he'd planned. His keycard beeped against the lock. Once, twice, 3 times. The confusion on his face would have been comical if it weren't so. Satisfying. He tried the handle, shaking it with increasing force. "Ruby!" His voice carried that particular blend of irritation and entitlement. "Ruby, open the door." He progressed from confusion to anger in 30 seconds flat, his face reddening as reality set in. "This isn't funny. Open the door right now." Margaret looked at me, one eyebrow raised in silent question. I nodded. She opened her door with theatrical calm, teacup in hand, looking every inch the distinguished retired judge despite the 3 a.m. hour. "Mr. Lawson," she said, her voice carrying the authority of 3 decades on the bench. "Having trouble?" Carter spun toward her, nearly losing his balance. My key, it's not working. How curious. Margaret took a deliberate sip of tea. Though I suppose it makes sense. Keys generally stop working when one no longer lives somewhere. The color drained from his face as he registered the boxes lining the hallway, his name on every label. What is this? I believe the legal term is personal property removal, Margaret said, though I particularly enjoyed the labeling system. Tuesday afternoons was especially creative. She gestured toward the box with the pink scarf visible through the clear tape. Your friend from accounting left that behind. Rather careless of her. Carter's phone began buzzing incessantly. The 2:30 a.m. email had landed. He pulled it out, his face illuminated by the screen as notification after notification appeared. His mother, his boss, Brad, the entire board of directors. His expression cycled through shock, rage, and finally, desperate understanding. She sent it to everyone, he whispered. Then louder, directed at my door. You sent it to everyone. He started pounding with both fists, the sound echoing through the hallway. You can't do this. This is my home. I have rights. Margaret calmly pulled out her phone and began recording. Please continue, Mr. Lawson. I'm sure Ruby's attorney will find this very helpful. Threatening behavior, attempted forced entry, intoxicated aggression. She paused. It's all quite compelling. Carter froze mid-pound, finally noticing the security camera I'd had installed last month, mounted discreetly in the corner. His bravado crumbled instantly. The man who'd humiliated me in front of colleagues, who'd declared his independence from our marriage with such theatrical confidence, actually whimpered. Margaret, he said, his voice cracking. Please, this is a misunderstanding. I don't think it is. I think this is clarity. She lowered her phone but kept recording. I've been a judge long enough to know the difference. Carter sank to his knees in front of the door, and I watched through Margaret's peephole as he cycled through the 5 stages of consequences in real time. Ruby, he called out, voice shifting to pleading. Please, let's talk about this. We can work it out. I made a mistake, but I believe she already tried talking, Margaret interrupted. At 2 separate company events, if the video evidence is accurate. You chose public humiliation instead of private conversation. She set down her teacup with finality. Now you're experiencing the natural consequences of that choice. I suggest you take your belongings and find somewhere else to sleep tonight. And Mr. Lawson? She waited until he looked at her. If you come back to this floor for any reason other than retrieving these boxes during daylight hours with advance notice, I will personally ensure your next accommodation has bars on the windows. Am I clear? He nodded mutely, broken. We watched him gather boxes with shaking hands, making multiple trips to the elevator, each journey more defeated than the last. When the elevator doors finally closed on his 3rd and final trip, Margaret turned to me. Would you like to watch the sunrise? I make excellent coffee to go with dawn revelations. We settled by her window as the city began its slow wake-up. The sky shifted from black to navy to that particular shade of pre-dawn blue that makes everything feel possible. Margaret pulled out a photo album, opening to a page from 1983. A younger version of herself stood in judicial robes, fierce and solitary. My first husband was a surgeon, she said. Brilliant, charming, systematically cruel. He made me feel small for being smart, inadequate for being successful. It took me 10 years to realize the lock keeping me trapped wasn't on any door. She tapped her temple. It was in here, in my belief that I needed his permission to be complete. She showed me another photo, her swearing-in ceremony as a district judge, the day after she'd left him. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in a decade, but it was lonely. Nobody talked about it then. Women just endured or escaped quietly. The sky lightened, painting clouds in shades of pink and gold. Your generation is different, Margaret continued. You document. You share. You refuse to disappear quietly into bad marriages. She raised her coffee cup toward me. To Locke's that change, both physical and mental. We sat in comfortable silence as morning came. 2 women from different generations bound by the understanding that sometimes justice looks like Earl Grey tea and carefully documented truth. My phone buzzed around 7 a.m. Shattering the peace, the caller ID read, Patricia Lawson. Carter's mother. Margaret nodded encouragingly. Sometimes the most surprising allies come from unexpected places, I answered. Ruby. Patricia's voice, usually sharp with Connecticut breeding and barely concealed disappointment in her son's choice of wife, trembled like autumn leaves. I've seen the email, the video, everything. A pause so long I thought the connection had dropped. What has my son done? For 14 years, this woman had treated me like the help who'd somehow tricked her precious Carter into marriage. She'd made comments about my father's blue-collar background. Suggested I take etiquette classes. Told her garden club friends that Carter had married down for love. Poor thing. Now her voice carried something I'd never heard before. Shame. He did exactly what you raised him to believe he could do, I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. Take what he wanted without consequences. The sharp intake of breath on the other end might have been a sob. I raised him better than this. His father would be appalled. His father was having an affair with his secretary when he died, Patricia. Carter learned from the best. Silence stretched between us, years of pretense crumbling in seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller, older, I suspected. But I couldn't face it. Just like I couldn't face what Carter was becoming. I'm keeping the Christmas china you gave me, I said, looking at the morning light dancing across Margaret's coffee table. It's the only thing from your family worth holding on to. Another pause, heavy with unspoken acknowledgments. Keep it all, dear, she whispered. The silver, the crystal, everything I insisted you weren't good enough to inherit. You earned it by surviving him. She hung up without goodbye, but somehow it felt like the most honest conversation we'd ever had. My phone immediately buzzed again. Sarah from IT, her voice electric with vindication. Ruby, you're not going to believe what I found. Actually, scratch that. You probably will. Margaret gestured for me to put it on speaker, her judicial instincts clearly interested. After I saw that video last night, I did some digging with my admin access. Sarah continued, typing audible through the phone. Your husband's been using company resources for everything. Hotel rooms booked as client meetings. Expensive dinners expensed as business development. More typing. I tracked his corporate card. Every Tuesday afternoon, same charge. The Marriott. All billed to the Henderson account. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. That's their biggest client. It gets worse, Sarah said. That startup he's been pushing? The one with Brad? I found the incorporation documents. Ruby, it doesn't exist. Brad's been investigated for fraud twice. Once in Boston, once in Chicago. The whole thing was a con to get your inheritance. My legs went weak. I sank into Margaret's chair, the weight of what I'd almost lost crushing down on me. $400,000. My father's life work, nearly stolen by the man who'd vowed to protect me. I've forwarded everything to HR and Mr. Davidson, Sarah continued. Also sent copies to the SEC whistleblower department. The fraud division loves this kind of thing. By the time I ended the call, my phone was exploding with messages. Jennifer from legal. We never liked how he talked about you. Like you were an accessory he'd purchased. Tom from sales. That video was brutal. You handled it with more class than he deserved. Even Brad's wife, Melissa. I'm leaving him too. Found out about the fraud investigation. You inspired me to stop ignoring red flags. But the message that stopped me cold came from Mr. Davidson himself. Miss Thorne, I apologize for our company culture that enabled this behavior. Mr. Lawson's employment is under review pending investigation of expense fraud. Would you consider consulting for us? We could use someone with your dignity and strategic thinking. Please call at your convenience. I screenshot everything, creating my own evidence folder. At 10 a.m., Harold called from the lobby. Miss Thorne, there's a flower delivery here. 3 dozen roses. I've refused them as you requested, but the delivery guy says they're paid for, and he can't take them back. Donate them to the hospital, I said. Tell them they're from an anonymous donor celebrating freedom. With pleasure. Harold's smile was audible. Also, there's a young man here who says he's Mr. Lawson's brother. Should I send him away? Danny. Carter's younger brother, fresh out of law school. Send him up. Margaret offered to leave, but I asked her to stay. Witnesses are always valuable. Danny arrived looking uncomfortable. His resemblance to Carter softened by genuine embarrassment. He stood in Margaret's doorway, shifting his weight like a child called to the principal's office. "Ruby, I'm sorry to bother you." He couldn't meet my eyes. "Carter called me at 6 a.m. Said if I came here and talked to you, convinced you to let him come back, he'd pay off my student loans. $70,000. He finally met my gaze. But I'm guessing that's not happening, is it? He doesn't have $70,000, I said gently. He's been living off my income for 2 years. His salary barely covers his car payment and his wardrobe. Danny's face went through several expressions before landing on anger. That lying piece of... He caught himself, glancing at Margaret. Sorry. He told me you were the one overspending. That you were bleeding him dry with shopping habits and your consulting hobby. My consulting hobby pays for everything. Danny, including the apartment he just got locked out of. Jesus. He ran his hands through his hair. Can I have some of that coffee? Retry continue over the next hour. Danny revealed pieces of Carter's hidden history I'd never known. The gambling debts from his MBA days that Patricia had quietly paid, $30,000 lost on sports betting and online poker. The previous engagement to a banker's daughter that ended when her father discovered Carter's lies about his family's wealth. The investment schemes at his first job that HR had buried to avoid scandal. I always wondered why he was so secretive about certain things, Danny said, staring into his coffee. Family gatherings? He'd change the subject whenever someone mentioned the past. Now it makes sense. He wasn't protecting family privacy. He was protecting his con game. Margaret leaned forward. Did your brother ever mention financial planning? Investment opportunities? Danny nodded slowly. He called me 2 weeks ago. Said he had an opportunity to triple my money if I could invest $20,000. Something about cryptocurrency and a buddy from Wharton. Brad? I said. Yeah. Brad something. How did you... Because he tried to get me to invest $400,000 of my inheritance into the same non-existent company. I pulled up Sarah's email on my phone, showing him the fraud investigation details. Danny's face went pale. He was going to scam his own brother. He was going to scam everyone, Margaret said. That's what con artists do. They practice on strangers, perfect their technique, then turn it on the people who trust them most. As Danny left, he paused at the door. Ruby, for what it's worth, the family knew you were too good for him. Even Mom, though she'd never admit it. We just didn't know how to tell you. He pulled out his phone. I'm going to call my parents. They should hear the whole story, not just Carter's version. After he left, Margaret and I sat in the growing morning light, watching my phone continue to buzz with messages. The digital unraveling was happening in real time, each notification another thread pulled from Carter's carefully woven image. You need to eat something, Margaret said, moving toward her kitchen. Revenge is exhausting work. She made scrambled eggs and toast while I compiled everything into a master file. Margaret's photographs, Sarah's expense reports, the credit card statements, the Venmo payments, text messages, and now Danny's testimony about the attempted family scam. Your attorney is going to have a field day with this, Margaret observed, setting a plate in front of me. My phone rang. Alexandra. I've been up since 4 a.m. reading the email you sent to Carter's entire contact list, she said without preamble. Ruby, this is the most comprehensively documented divorce case I've seen in 20 years. We're not just winning. We're going nuclear. Good. I'm looking at expense fraud, identity theft, those charges under your name, embezzlement from marital assets, and possibly wire fraud with this fake investment scheme. The district attorney's office is going to be very interested. She paused. But I need to ask, how far do you want to take this? Because we can pursue criminal charges. We can make this a very public, very ugly legal battle. Or we can leverage everything for a quick, clean divorce where he walks away with nothing but his freedom. I looked at Margaret, who'd spent 30 years weighing justice against mercy. What would you do? I asked her. Margaret was quiet for a moment, her judicial mind clearly working through options. What do you want, Ruby? Not revenge, you already have that. What do you actually want? I thought about 14 years of marriage, of being made small, of swallowing objections and doubts, of counting 17 seconds of public laughter while my world cracked apart. I want him to understand consequences, I said slowly. Real consequences, the kind that follow you. Then criminal charges, Alexandra said, because those don't go away with a signature. But, I continued, I don't want to spend the next 2 years of my life in courtrooms. I don't want him to be the center of my story anymore. Margaret nodded approvingly. So here's what we do, I said, the strategy crystallizing. We file everything with the DA, let them investigate. But we offer Carter a deal. He signs away all rights to marital property, agrees to the NDA, makes a full financial disclosure, and most importantly, he doesn't contest anything. In exchange, we don't push for prosecution. Mercy with teeth, Margaret said. I like it. Make him sweat first, I added. Let him think criminal charges are coming. Let him feel what it's like when everything you thought was solid turns out to be built on lies. Alexandra's laugh was sharp. Psychological warfare. I'll draft the papers today. We can serve him by Thursday. After hanging up, I finally allowed myself to feel the exhaustion settling into my bones. I'd been awake for over 24 hours, running on adrenaline and righteous anger. You should sleep, Margaret said gently. I'll keep watch. Old habit from my court security days. But before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Ruby Thorne? A woman's voice, nervous and young, speaking. This is... My name is Jennifer Chen. I work at Enterprise Rental Cars near the airport. My entire body went still. I saw your name on the news this morning, the story about your divorce, and I think I need to tell you something. Okay. Your husband, Carter Lawson. He's been renting cars from us every other weekend for the past year. Not under his name, under a corporate account for Henderson Consulting. He always requests the same thing, SUVs, good gas mileage, unlimited mileage packages. My blood went cold. Henderson Consulting was a fake company. Sarah had discovered that during her digging. Where does he drive them? That's the thing, I'm not supposed to tell you this. Violates privacy policies and everything, but... She took a breath. He always asks for recommendations for good routes to Chicago. Says he has family there. Carter didn't have family in Chicago. How often? Twice a month. Sometimes 3 times. He'd rent Friday afternoon, return Sunday night. The mileage always showed around 600 miles. Perfect for a round trip to Chicago and back. Margaret was already pulling up a map on her tablet. Jennifer, did he ever mention where specifically in Chicago? Once he asked about hotels near Northwestern University. My mind raced. Northwestern. Carter had mentioned a potential client near Northwestern last year. Said he was working on bringing them in. Networking. Building relationships. Thank you for calling, I said. This is important information. There's one more thing. He always paid cash for the insurance add-on, separate from the corporate card, like he wanted that specific charge off the books. After hanging up, I looked at Margaret, whose expression had shifted from supportive to deeply concerned. What's in Chicago? I asked. That's what we're going to find out. Margaret called someone she referred to only as Richard, an old friend from my federal court days. Within an hour, Richard had information, a property deed in Cook County, Illinois. An apartment purchased 18 months ago under an LLC called Lawson Holdings. Carter had bought a second apartment, in another state. The mortgage payments, Margaret said, pulling up the financial documents Richard had sent. Look at the amounts, $200 monthly, matching almost exactly the amounts missing from our joint account that I'd attributed to Carter's business expenses. He's been living a double life, I whispered. Not just cheating, actually maintaining a whole separate existence. My phone buzzed. Sarah again. Ruby, I found something else in the email server. Carter had a separate email account registered through the company domain. Called it his Chicago correspondence folder. Can you access it? Already did. Ruby, there are emails to apartment complexes, utility companies, furniture stores, all with a Chicago address. She paused. And there are emails to a woman named Amanda. Hundreds of them. Going back 2 years. 2 years. Before Stephanie. Before the Tuesday afternoons. Forward everything to Alexandra, I said, my voice eerily calm. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was a complete shadow life, methodically constructed and carefully hidden. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. Some of the emails mention a child, references to picking her up from daycare and her first day of preschool. The room tilted. Margaret caught my arm, steadying me into a chair. A child? I can't confirm it from just the emails, but Sarah's voice was gentle. Ruby, I think your husband has a daughter in Chicago, and I think he's been supporting her with money from your joint account. I hung up and sat in Margaret's chair, staring at nothing while my brain tried to process information that didn't fit into any framework I had for understanding my marriage. A daughter. Carter had a daughter. We need more information before we react, Margaret said, already back on the phone with Richard. Give me an hour. That hour was the longest of my life. Margaret made more coffee. I didn't drink it. She put on classical music. I didn't hear it. I sat in that chair and replayed every moment of our 14-year marriage, looking for the signs I'd missed. The weekends he'd said he was at conferences. The mysterious fishing trips with college buddies he'd never wanted me to join. The way he'd always insisted on keeping our finances organized and handling all the boring paperwork. He'd had a daughter. For how long? How old was she? And who was Amanda? When Margaret's phone finally rang, I watched her face as she listened to Richard's findings. Her expression shifted from professional interest to genuine shock. Are you certain? She asked. Then yes, send everything. She hung up and looked at me with something close to pity. Amanda Reeves. Age 32. Met Carter at a business conference in Chicago 3 years ago. They have a 2-year-old daughter named Lily. My hand went to my mouth. He told Amanda he was divorced. Showed her forged papers, according to email evidence Richard found. He's been paying her $2,100 monthly, which she believes is child support from their custody agreement. So she doesn't know, I whispered. She thinks he's a divorced dad doing his best. She thinks you don't exist, Ruby. Just like you didn't know she existed. Margaret's tablet chimed with incoming files. Photos appeared on the screen. Surveillance footage from the Chicago apartment building, time-stamped from various weekends over the past year. Carter entering with groceries. Carter pushing a stroller. Carter looking happy and domestic, and nothing like the man who'd humiliated me in front of his colleagues. And then a photo of a little girl with Carter's eyes and his smile, holding his hand as they walked into a park. I felt something crack inside me that had nothing to do with the divorce or the betrayal. This little girl, Lily, was innocent. She thought she had a dad who loved her. She didn't know her father was a liar who'd been stealing from his wife to support his secret family. We have to tell Amanda, I said. Margaret nodded. Richard already located her contact information. But Ruby, you need to think about this carefully. Once we tell her, we can't take it back. Her entire reality collapses. Like mine did, I said. Except hers involves a child who's going to wonder why Daddy doesn't visit anymore. I looked at the photos of Lily again. 2 years old, the same age Carter and I had talked about having kids. Someday, when the time was right. The time was never right, because he already had a child. Call her, I said. But I want to be the one to tell her, woman to woman, before this becomes a legal mess that gets leaked to the press. Margaret handed me her phone with Amanda's number already dialed. It rang 3 times before a tired female voice answered. Hello? Amanda Reeves? Yes, who is this? My name is Ruby Thorne. I'm calling about Carter Lawson. I took a breath. Amanda, I need to tell you something that's going to be very difficult to hear. Is there somewhere you can sit down? A pause. What's wrong? Is Carter okay? Is this about the accident? There's no accident. Carter is fine physically, but Amanda... I looked at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. Carter is my husband. We've been married for 14 years. We're not divorced. We were never divorced. Silence on the other end. Complete and total silence. Amanda? That's not possible. Her voice had changed, gotten smaller. He showed me the papers. The divorce was finalized 2 years ago. He said his ex-wife was difficult, that she refused to let him talk about her because of the custody battle over assets. There is no custody battle. There are no divorce papers. I found out about you 3 hours ago. I gentled my voice. Amanda, I'm so sorry. But he's been lying to both of us. No, you're trying to break us up. He said you might try this. He warned me you were vindictive, that you couldn't let go. Amanda, please listen. I can prove everything. I have our marriage certificate, tax returns filed jointly, photos from our anniversary last month. I can send you everything right now. I heard what might have been a sob. He was just here. 2 days ago. He had Lily. They went to the zoo. He was going to take her for her 2-year pictures next weekend. Amanda, I'm not trying to hurt you. But you deserve to know the truth, and Lily deserves to know the truth. Another long silence. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, send me the proof. I sent her everything. Marriage certificate, joint tax returns, photos of Carter and me at our anniversary dinner last month. The same weekend he'd told her he was at a work conference. I waited while she looked at everything, hearing her breathing change, quicken, then break into quiet crying. He has a wife, she finally said. This whole time. Oh God, I'm the other woman. You're a victim, Amanda, just like me. He lied to you just as thoroughly as he lied to me. But Lily, what about Lily? She loves her daddy. She asks about him every day. What do I tell her? And there it was, the real consequence of Carter's lies. Not the financial fraud or the property disputes. A 2-year-old girl who was about to learn that her reality wasn't real. I don't know, I admitted. I don't have children. I don't know what you tell her. But Amanda, you need to get a lawyer, a real lawyer, not one Carter recommends. And you need to file for child support with full disclosure. Make him pay legally on the record. How? Her voice cracked. I don't have money for a lawyer. Carter pays for everything. If he stops... I looked at Margaret, who was already nodding. I'll help you, I said. My attorney will help you. Because Amanda, if we're both victims of his fraud, we should work together, not against each other. We talked for another 20 minutes. I learned that Carter had told her he was a divorced executive from Minneapolis, that his ex-wife had gotten the apartment in the divorce, that he was rebuilding his life. He'd been generous with money, $2,100 monthly plus extras for Lily's needs. He'd seemed devoted, present during his weekend visits. He seemed so real, Amanda whispered. How do you fake that? Practice, I said bitterly. 14 years of practice. After we hung up, I sat with Margaret in the growing afternoon light, processing what felt like layer upon layer of betrayal. He built 2 complete lives, Margaret said. Maintained both with enough detail that neither of us suspected. That requires a level of calculation that's almost sociopathic, I finished. My phone buzzed. Alexandra. I just got a call from a woman named Amanda Reeves, she said. She says you told her to contact me. Yes, she's Carter's other victim. He has a child with her, Amanda, a 2-year-old daughter, and he's been using our money to support his second family. Alexandra was quiet for a long moment. Ruby, this changes everything. This isn't just divorce. This is potentially bigamy if he misrepresented his marital status in legal documents. It's definitely fraud, and with a child involved, child services might need to be notified. I don't want to hurt the little girl, I said firmly. She didn't ask for any of this. Agreed. But Carter's parental rights might be affected by the fraud. We need to be very careful how we proceed. We spent the next hour strategizing. Alexandra would represent both Amanda and me, sister victims, as she called us, in parallel legal actions. We'd coordinate to make sure Carter couldn't play us against each other or use one case to hide assets from the other. I'm calling this Operation Complete Disclosure, Alexandra said with grim satisfaction. By the time we're done, every lie Carter's told will be exposed, every hidden asset discovered, every woman he's deceived will have justice. As the sun set on what felt like the longest day of my life, Margaret brought out a bottle of wine. You need to rest, she said. Tomorrow starts the legal war. Tonight, you need to process what you've learned. I took the wine glass but didn't drink. There might be more, I said quietly. If he could hide an entire second family in Chicago, what else don't I know? Margaret sat beside me, and for a moment we just watched the city lights come on across Minneapolis. The truth has a way of surfacing, she said finally, especially when someone starts really looking. And Ruby, you've opened the floodgates. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Amanda. Thank you for telling me. I think there's more you should know. He has a storage unit here in Chicago. 2 at Secure Space on Clark Street. The code is 4427. I'm not supposed to know about it, but I saw him enter it once when I drove by. Whatever's in there, I think you need to see it." I showed Margaret the text. "Tomorrow," she said firmly. "Tonight you sleep. Tomorrow we find out what else Carter has been hiding." But I didn't sleep. I lay in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about a little girl named Lily who had her father's eyes, and a woman named Amanda who thought she'd found love with a divorced dad, and a storage unit in Chicago that might hold more secrets than any of us were ready to find. At 3 a.m., I made a decision. I texted Marcus. "I need a road trip to Chicago. Can you drive me tomorrow?" His response came immediately. "I'll pick you up at 6 a.m. Bring coffee." Then I texted Amanda. "Thank you for trusting me with this information. I'm coming to Chicago tomorrow. Would you be willing to meet?" Her response took longer, but finally came. "Yes. I think we should see what's in that storage unit together. Both of us. We deserve to know everything." I lay back down, watching the city lights through my windows, and realized something profound. Carter had created this elaborate web of lies, thinking he was the spider in control. He'd never considered that his victims might find each other, might compare notes, might become allies instead of adversaries. That was going to be his biggest mistake. Marcus picked me up at exactly 6 a.m. in his SUV, 2 large coffees already in the cup holders and a grim expression on his face. "You really think there's more?" he asked as we merged onto I-94 East. "I know there is." Margaret had insisted on coming too, citing her investigative experience and witness credibility. She sat in the back seat with her tablet, already coordinating with Richard and Alexandra. The drive to Chicago should have taken 7 hours. Marcus made it in 6. We met Amanda at a diner near the storage facility. I spotted her immediately, petite, dark hair, exhausted eyes that mirrored my own. She was holding a toddler with Carter's unmistakable features, the same blue eyes, the same stubborn chin. Lily. Amanda's hand trembled as she shook mine. "I still can't believe this is real." "Neither can I admitted. We sat across from each other while Marcus ordered coffee, and Margaret kept Lily entertained with her phone. "How long were you together?" I asked. 3 years. Met at a consulting conference in Chicago. He was charming, successful, said all the right things. Amanda laughed bitterly. Said he was recently divorced, that his ex-wife had been controlling and difficult, that he was finally free to find real love. The same things he said about me when we were dating, I realized. I was his escape from a difficult family situation. His parents were supposedly overbearing. Amanda's eyes widened. He told me his parents were dead. Of course he did. Easier than risking them mentioning a wife. When did you get pregnant? 8 months after we met. It wasn't planned, but Carter seemed happy, said he'd always wanted to be a father. That his first marriage hadn't worked out partly because his ex didn't want kids. I felt that familiar knife twist. Carter and I had talked about children constantly in our early years. Then he'd started saying, "Not yet. Let's wait until we're more financially stable." Meanwhile, he was starting a family with someone else. "Does he know you're here?" Margaret asked quietly. Amanda shook her head. "I told him Lily and I went to visit my sister in Wisconsin. He's supposed to come visit this weekend." She looked at me. "What do I do when he shows up?" "We'll cross that bridge after we see what's in the storage unit," I said. Secure Space storage looked like every other facility in America. Rows of identical orange doors, fluorescent lighting, and that peculiar smell of dust and forgotten things. Unit 217 was on the 2nd floor, tucked in a corner where security cameras didn't quite reach. Amanda punched in the code, 4427. The lock clicked open. What we found inside changed everything we thought we understood about Carter Lawson. The unit was organized with meticulous precision. File boxes labeled by year lined one wall. On the other side, plastic bins were marked with names: Ruby, Amanda. And shockingly, 3 more names: Jennifer, Melissa, Sarah K. 5 women. Carter had bins for 5 different women. Oh my God, Amanda whispered. Margaret immediately started photographing everything while Marcus began pulling down boxes. The Ruby bin contained documents I'd never seen. Life insurance policies I didn't know existed, with Carter as the sole beneficiary. Forged signatures on loan applications. Bank statements showing the $40,000 he'd embezzled from our joint account. But there was more. A notebook with meticulous handwriting, Carter's handwriting, detailing a timeline. Phase 1. Establish trust and financial dependence. Phase 2. Isolate from support systems. Phase 3. Introduce investment opportunity. Phase 4. Transfer assets. Phase 5. Exit strategy. It was a playbook. A literal step-by-step guide to financial fraud disguised as marriage. Amanda's bin was similar but newer. The same phases, except hers stopped at Phase 3. He hadn't gotten to Phase 4 with her yet. The asset transfer. He was going to do to you what he did to me, I said quietly. What's in the other bins? Marcus asked. We opened Jennifer's bin first. Documents showed she was a physician in Seattle. Carter had dated her 2 years ago, gotten engaged, then disappeared after she invested $50,000 in a business opportunity with him. Melissa's bin was even worse. A teacher in Boston. Carter had convinced her to take out a second mortgage on her home, $120,000, for an investment that never materialized. She'd lost her house. Sarah Kay's bin was the oldest, dating back 6 years. She'd been a junior executive in Denver. Carter had courted her for months, convinced her to name him beneficiary on her life insurance. Then, according to newspaper clippings in the bin, she died in a suspicious car accident. The police had investigated. Nothing was ever proven, but Carter had kept the clippings. And a copy of the $200,000 life insurance payout. Amanda backed away from the bins, her hand over her mouth. He's done this before. Multiple times. We're not victims. We're marks. We're survivors, Margaret corrected, her phone pressed to her ear. Richard? I need FBI contact immediately. We're looking at serial fraud, possibly worse. I kept digging through the bins, my hands shaking. Birth certificates, social security numbers, credit card statements. Carter had collected everything about each woman. Personal information that could be used for identity theft or worse. Then I found the other notebook, leather-bound, locked with a small combination padlock. Marcus broke it open without hesitation. The pages inside were written in code initially, but Carter had gotten lazy toward the back. Regular entries in plain English. Ruby still doesn't suspect Chicago arrangement. Should be able to keep both households running for another 6 to 8 months before investment push. Father's death was convenient timing. Inheritance will fund exit strategy. My father's death. He'd died 8 months ago. Carter had called it convenient timing. Another entry, dated 3 weeks ago. Amanda asking questions about weekend absences. May need to accelerate timeline. Inheritance from Ruby could cover payoff and still leave enough to start fresh in Portland. Jennifer M. there has potential. Doctor, no family, lonely. Could be ready by spring. He was planning to leave both of us, Amanda said, reading over my shoulder. Take your money and move on to the next woman. Jennifer M. in Portland, I said. There's another one. He's already working on her. Margaret's face had gone pale. Ruby, look at the date on Sarah Kay's insurance payout. I found the document. The check had been deposited 2 weeks after her fatal accident. The amount? $200,000, the same amount as my father's life insurance policy. The policy Carter had been managing for me. The policy he'd recently suggested. Updating, to make sure everything's in order. Sat down hard on a stack of boxes, the implication crushing. He's done this before, I whispered. Sarah Kay wasn't an accident. We don't know that, Marcus said quickly, but his expression said he was thinking the same thing. Margaret was already talking rapid fire into her phone. Federal investigation. Serial fraud. Possible homicide. Yes, I can stay on scene. 5 victims that we know of. Amanda sank to the floor, Lily squirming in her lap. I let him around my daughter. I let this man, this monster, around my child. I moved to sit beside her, and for a moment we just existed in the horror of what we'd discovered. We document everything. I said finally. Every piece of paper, every file, every notebook entry. We photograph it all, and then we make sure Carter Lawson never does this to anyone else. We worked for 4 hours, Marcus and Margaret cataloging while Amanda and I read through the evidence of Carter's systematic destruction of women's lives. Jennifer, in Seattle, had attempted suicide after losing her $50,000. There were newspaper clippings about that. 2, Melissa in Boston had filed for bankruptcy, lost her teaching license due to financial issues, and was currently living with her parents at age 47. And Sarah Kay had a memorial website, 28 years old when she died. Her family still posted memories there, still grieved. The car accident report was in the bin, too. Single vehicle collision on a rural road. No witnesses. Brake failure cited as probable cause. The brakes were sabotaged, Margaret said, reading over my shoulder. They just couldn't prove it. By the time we finished documenting everything, the storage unit looked like a crime scene investigation, which, essentially it was. Margaret's FBI contact, a woman named Agent Torres, arrived with 2 other agents and immediately locked down the unit. This is going to take weeks to process, Torres said, surveying the bins. Ma'am, she addressed me and Amanda both. I need you to understand that this is now a federal investigation. Wire fraud, identity theft, possibly conspiracy to commit murder. You cannot contact the subject. You cannot warn him. Do you understand? What happens to my daughter? Amanda asked. If Carter is arrested, does she lose her father? Agent Torres' expression softened slightly. Ma'am, I can't answer that yet. But I can tell you this. If this man is what we think he is, your daughter is safer without him in her life. We drove back to Minneapolis in silence, Lily sleeping in her car seat between Amanda and Margaret, while Marcus navigated through rush hour traffic. My phone had 17 missed calls from Carter. I'd turned it off in the storage unit, unable to bear the thought of hearing his voice. When we finally arrived back at my apartment building at 9 p.m., Harold was waiting in the lobby with a grave expression. Miss Thorne, Mr. Lawson has been here 3 times today. He's agitated, says he needs to talk to you about important financial matters. I told him you weren't available, but he's insistent. Did he threaten you? Not directly, but he implied he knows people who could make my life difficult. Harold straightened his shoulders. I've dealt with bigger threats than Carter Lawson. Margaret squeezed my hand. You should stay with me tonight. Both of you, she added, looking at Amanda. We had just reached Margaret's door when the elevator chimed behind us. Carter stepped out, and for a moment none of us moved. He looked terrible. 3 days without shaving, rumpled clothes, eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep or crying or both. But when he saw us all together, me, Amanda, Lily, Margaret, Marcus, his expression shifted from desperate to calculating. Ruby, he started, voice shaking. I can explain. Were you going to kill me, Carter? The question stopped him cold. What? No, Ruby, where is this coming from? Sarah Kay in Denver. The convenient brake failure. The $200,000 insurance payout. I stepped toward him. You kept the newspaper clippings. You kept everything, like trophies. His face went white. I don't know what you think you found, but federal agents are processing a storage unit in Chicago right now, Margaret interrupted. Unit 217, ring a bell? Carter's knees actually buckled. He caught himself on the wall. You kept records of everything, Carter, Amanda said quietly, Lily asleep on her shoulder. Every woman you targeted, every fraud you committed. We know about Jennifer, about Melissa, about Sarah. And we know about your timeline, I added. Phase 5, exit strategy. Were you going to fake my death too? Another convenient accident? Or were you just going to disappear with my father's inheritance? Carter looked between all of us, seeing his carefully constructed lies collapsing in real time. I loved you, he said desperately. Both of you. I know it's complicated, but I loved... You're a sociopath, Margaret said flatly. And you're about to be arrested. As if on cue, the elevator chimed again. Agent Torres stepped out with 2 other agents. Carter Lawson? He tried to run. Actually tried to bolt past us toward the stairwell. Marcus clotheslined him casually, and Carter went down hard, the fight going out of him in an instant. Carter Lawson, Agent Torres said formally, snapping handcuffs on him. You're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." As they read him his rights, Carter looked at me one last time. "Ruby, please. I never meant to hurt you." "Yes," I said quietly. "You did." That was the entire point. They led him away, and I stood in that hallway with Amanda, Margaret, Marcus, and little Lily. 5 people bound together by one man's cruelty. "It's over," Amanda whispered. But I knew better. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning of making sure Carter faced consequences for everything he'd done to all of us. The morning after Carter's arrest, I woke up in Margaret's guest room to the sound of my phone exploding with notifications. News travels fast in the digital age, but apparently federal arrests of corporate executives travel at light speed. Minneapolis executive arrested in multi-state fraud scheme. Serial con artist targeted professional women. FBI says bigamy and fraud, the double life of Carter Lawson. Every major news outlet had picked up the story. The company Carter worked for had released a statement distancing themselves. His LinkedIn profile had been deleted. His Instagram, which had been full of carefully curated images of success and happiness, was now private. Carter Lawson was being erased from public life in real time. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Margaret appeared in the doorway with coffee. Agent Torres called. "She wants to meet with you and Amanda this morning. They found something else." We gathered in Margaret's living room an hour later. Me, Amanda, Margaret, Alexandra, and Agent Torres with her laptop open on the coffee table. "We cracked his encrypted files last night," Torres said without preamble. "Ladies, what we found goes beyond what we initially thought." She pulled up a spreadsheet. "Carter Lawson has been running this operation for 12 years. We've identified 9 victims so far, possibly more. The total amount stolen is over $1.2 million, 9 women. Over a decade of systematic fraud. Sarah Kay wasn't his first," Torres continued. "There was a woman in Atlanta before her, Christine Park, died in a house fire 7 years ago. Insurance payout of $150,000. Carter was named beneficiary. They'd been engaged for 6 months." Amanda's hand went to her mouth. "He's killed before. We're investigating. But Ruby, there's something specific you need to know." Torres turned her laptop toward me. "Your father's life insurance policy. Carter filed a change of beneficiary form 3 months before your father died. You were listed as sole beneficiary originally. Carter changed it to joint beneficiaries, you and him." My coffee cup slipped from my fingers, shattering on Margaret's hardwood floor. "He did what?" "The insurance company accepted the form because it appeared to have your signature. But we've had forensic document analysts examine it. Ruby, that's not your signature. It's a forgery." The room tilted. Marcus caught my elbow, steadying me. "So if I had died?" "Carter would have received $200,000 from your father's policy, plus whatever life insurance you carried, plus the apartment, plus your business assets." Torres met my eyes directly. "Ruby, I think you were in serious danger. The timeline in his notebook suggests he was planning something for this month." Margaret's voice cut through the shock. "What's your evidence level for prosecuting the murders?" "Circumstantial on Sarah Kay and Christine Park. But with Ruby still alive and his pattern documented, we can pursue attempted fraud charges that carry significant prison time. Plus the confirmed fraud cases. Jennifer's $50,000, Melissa's $120,000, various identity theft charges." Torres closed her laptop. "He's looking at 25 to 30 years minimum. And that's if we don't prove the murders." "I want to find them," I said suddenly. "All of them. Every woman he hurt. They deserve to know they're not alone." Alexandra leaned forward. "Ruby, I've already started drafting a class action suit. We can pursue civil damages in addition to the criminal prosecution. These women deserve restitution. And more than that," Amanda added quietly, "they deserve to know it wasn't their fault, that they weren't stupid or weak or naive, that he was just that good at manipulation." Torres pulled out her phone. "I can share contact information for Jennifer in Seattle and Melissa in Boston. They've already been notified of Carter's arrest. Both have agreed to testify." "What about Christine Park's family?" Margaret asked. "They deserve answers too." "We're reaching out. The Atlanta PD is reopening her case." Torres stood. Ladies, this is going to get intense. Media attention will be brutal. Carter's attorney will try to paint all of you in a negative light. Are you prepared for that? I looked at Amanda, who met my gaze with steel in her eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. Let them try, Amanda said. I've got a daughter to protect. If telling my story keeps other women safe, then I'll tell it as many times as I need to. Same, I said. He took 14 years of my life. I'm taking back the narrative. The media circus began in earnest that afternoon. News vans camped outside my building. Reporters shouted questions whenever anyone entered or exited. My phone rang constantly with requests for interviews, book deals, podcast appearances. I declined them all except one. A local investigative journalist named Maria Santos, who'd built her career exposing predators who targeted women. We met at Maria's office downtown, a cramped space filled with case files and awards for journalism excellence. I want to tell this story right, Maria said immediately. Not the tabloid version, the real version. What it's like to be systematically manipulated by someone you love, how these men operate, how women can protect themselves. She pulled out a recorder. Ruby, will you tell me everything? Start to finish? I told her about the 17 seconds of laughter, about finding the hotel charges, about the storage unit in Chicago, and the bins with 5 women's names, about Carter's notebook and his phases and his exit strategies. Maria listened for 3 hours, taking notes, asking clarifying questions, her expression growing darker as the story unfolded. This is bigger than one man's fraud, she said finally. This is about a system that allows men like Carter to operate for years before anyone stops them. How many women reported suspicions to police and were told it was a civil matter? How many friends and family members noticed red flags but said nothing because they didn't want to interfere in someone's relationship? She was right. Carter hadn't operated in a vacuum. He'd existed in a culture that made his crimes possible. I want to find the others, I said. The women in his notebook who I didn't recognize. What if there are more victims we don't know about? Maria's eyes lit up with that particular gleam investigative journalists get when they sense a bigger story. Give me 48 hours. While Maria worked her sources, Alexandra coordinated with the other victims for the class action lawsuit. We held our first group video call 2 days after Carter's arrest. 7 faces appeared on my laptop screen. Amanda, Jennifer from Seattle, Melissa from Boston, and 4 other women Maria had located. Patricia from Austin, Linda from Phoenix, Rebecca from Nashville, and Michelle from Portland. Michelle was the Jennifer M. from Carter's notebook. He'd been grooming her online for 3 months, planning to move to Portland after he'd extracted my father's inheritance. I thought I was special, Michelle said, her voice breaking. He made me feel seen in a way I'd never experienced. How did I not realize it was an act? Because he's a professional, Jennifer said bitterly. She looked exhausted, older than her 39 years. I'm a physician. I diagnose manipulation disorders for a living, and I still fell for it. Melissa spoke next, her teacher's voice careful and measured. I lost my house, my career, my retirement savings, but worse than that, I lost my faith in my own judgment. I spent 2 years thinking I was the stupid one. You're not stupid, Amanda said firmly, Lily playing in the background of her video feed. None of us are. We're educated, successful women who were targeted by a predator who spent years perfecting his technique. How many more are there? Patricia asked. She was a lawyer. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. If we found 7 victims, how many didn't come forward? How many are still out there thinking they were the only one? That question hung heavy in the digital air between us. We make noise, I said finally. We tell our stories loudly enough that anyone else he victimized feels safe coming forward. We make sure he can't hide behind shame or silence. Alexandra cleared her throat. I've drafted the class action paperwork. The total damages we're claiming, between stolen money, forged documents, identity theft, and emotional trauma, come to $2.3 million. But Ruby, I need to tell you something. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Carter has maybe $40,000 in liquid assets. His salary is garnished as of his arrest. His 401k is minimal. He's been cashing it out systematically to fund his operation. Even if we win every penny we're claiming, we'll never collect it all. I don't care about the money, I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. I want him in prison. I want his name attached to his crimes. I want every woman who Googles him in the future to know exactly what he is." "That," Maria Santos interjected from her own video box, "I can guarantee. My article publishes tomorrow. Front page, 5,000 words, full documentation. I'm calling it The Marriage Con, Inside the Mind of a Serial Fraudster." "Will it mention all of us?" Rebecca asked nervously. "Only those who want to be named. Ruby and Amanda have agreed to go public. The rest of you can be anonymous sources if you prefer. But either way, Carter Lawson's face will be plastered across every newspaper in the region." After the call ended, I sat alone in my apartment, truly alone for the first time since this began. The city lights stretched before me, and I thought about Christine Park and Sarah Kay, the women who hadn't survived Carter's schemes. They deserved justice, too. I pulled up the memorial website for Sarah Kay and started reading through the posts from her family. Her mother wrote every week, "Missing you today, baby girl. The world is less bright without you." Her sister had posted photos. Sarah laughing at a picnic, Sarah graduating from college, Sarah looking happy and alive and unaware that she had months left to live. I opened a new message to the website administrator. "My name is Ruby Thorne. I was married to the man your sister was dating when she died. I believe he killed her. The FBI is investigating. You deserve to know the truth." I hit send before I could second guess it. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. "Unknown Colorado number. This is Catherine Kelly," a woman's voice said. "Sarah's sister." "Did you really just say—" "Yes, I'm sorry. I know this must be—" "We always knew," Catherine interrupted. "We always knew something was wrong. The police said it was an accident, but Sarah was the most careful driver. She'd just had her brakes serviced 2 weeks before. And then that man, Carter, he showed up at her funeral crying, making it about him. We asked him to leave. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Tell me everything." We talked for 2 hours. I told her about the storage unit, the bins, the meticulous records Carter had kept, about the other women and the pattern and the insurance payouts. "He kept clippings of her obituary," Catherine said, her voice hollow. "Like a trophy? Like documentation. He documented everything. I need to talk to this FBI agent. I need to tell her everything we suspected, but couldn't prove." Catherine's voice strengthened. "My family has been living with accident for 6 years. If there's even a chance we can prove it was murder, that Sarah's death meant something, that someone will be held accountable." "Agent Torres. I'll send you her contact information. Ruby, thank you. Thank you for giving my sister back her truth." After hanging up, I discovered I was crying, not for myself or even for Sarah, but for all the women caught in Carter's web. For the years stolen, the trust broken, the lives derailed. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Come over. Emergency cookie situation. Christine Park's mother is here." I found them in Margaret's kitchen. Margaret, Amanda with sleeping Lily in a carrier, and an elegant Asian woman in her 60s who looked like she'd been carved from grief and determination. "Mrs. Park," I said. "Susan," she corrected. "My daughter was Christine. She died 7 years ago in a house fire. Your FBI agent called me this morning." She pulled out a photo, a beautiful young woman with bright eyes and her whole life ahead of her. Christine was brilliant. Chemical engineer, PhD from MIT. She could have worked anywhere, done anything. Then she met Carter Lawson at a conference. Susan's hands trembled on the photo. 6 months later, she was dead. The fire marshal said it started in the kitchen. Electrical fault in the stove. But Christine never used that stove. She ordered takeout every night. She hated cooking. You suspected, Margaret said gently. I knew. Susan's voice was steel. A mother knows. But I had no proof. Carter had an alibi. He was at a business dinner with 12 witnesses. The insurance investigation found nothing suspicious. I was just the grieving mother who couldn't accept an accident. She looked directly at me. Then Agent Torres called and told me about the storage unit, about the pattern, about 9 other women. Susan's composure cracked slightly. My daughter wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. He killed her and made it look like an accident, and I've spent 7 years being told I was in denial. The FBI is reopening the case, I said. They're looking at everything with fresh eyes. It won't bring her back. Susan carefully put away the photo. but it will give her truth. And maybe it will save the next woman Carter Lawson would have targeted. There won't be a next woman, Amanda said quietly. He's not getting out of prison. Susan looked at her, at tired Amanda with her baby and her shattered illusions, and something shifted in her expression. How old is your daughter? 2. Her name is Lily. My Christine would be 35 now. She wanted children. Susan reached out and gently touched Lily's sleeping head. I'm glad there's a child who gets to grow up because women like you were brave enough to stop him. We sat in Margaret's kitchen, 4 women connected by one man's cruelty, and shared our stories. Susan told us about the strange financial requests Carter had made toward the end, the way he'd pressured Christine to make him beneficiary on her life insurance, the sudden interest in her will. He was setting up the con, Margaret observed. Even 7 years ago he had the pattern down. Which means there might be more before Christine, I said. What if he's been doing this for 15 years, 20? Agent Torres arrived at Margaret's apartment an hour later, with news that made my blood run cold. We've identified 3 more potential victims, women who died in suspicious circumstances while in relationships with men matching Carter's description. Different names, but we ran facial recognition on old social media photos. She pulled up images on her tablet. Diane Morrison died in a boating accident in Florida 12 years ago. She'd been dating a man named Chad Lawrence, financial consultant, recent divorce, met at a conference. The photo showed Carter at maybe 29, beard covering his face, different hairstyle. But the eyes were unmistakable. Rachel Chen fell from a hiking trail in Oregon 14 years ago, dating a man named Christopher Lane, investment banker, tragic past, sweep you off your feet romance. Carter again, younger, different appearance, same eyes. And the first one we can confirm, Emma Rodriguez. Car accident in Texas 15 years ago. She'd just changed her will to include her boyfriend, Carson Lawson. He collected $100,000, Carson Lawson. He'd barely bothered to change his name. 15 years, I whispered. He's been doing this for 15 years. That we know of, Torres corrected. We're still investigating. But Ruby, this is why your case is so important. You're the first one who figured it out before you died. You're the one who can testify to his pattern, his methodology, his intent. When's the trial? Preliminary hearing is in 3 weeks. Full trial probably 6 months out. But with this much evidence, his attorney is already making noise about a plea deal. No deal, Susan Park said flatly. My daughter deserves her day in court. All of them do, Catherine Kelly said from the doorway. I hadn't heard her arrive, but she stood there with a woman who looked like an older version of the photos I'd seen of Sarah. Mom, Catherine said, this is Ruby Thorne. She's the one who, Sarah's mother crossed the room and hugged me without a word. Just held me while she cried. This stranger who'd lost her daughter to the same man who'd tried to destroy me. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were fierce. We're going to bury him, she said, legally, publicly, completely. For Sarah, for Christine, for all of them. Maria Santos's article hit newsstands the next morning and went viral by noon. The marriage con. Inside the mind of a serial fraudster, she'd done exactly what she promised, told the story with unflinching detail, named Carter and his crimes, included interviews with me, Amanda, Jennifer, and Melissa. The article laid out the pattern, the phases, the psychological manipulation. But more importantly, it included a hotline number. If you believe you or someone you know was victimized by Carter Lawson or his aliases, please call 1-800-FRAUD-HELP. By 5 p.m., the hotline had received 47 calls. By the next morning, that number was up to 203. 3 more confirmed victims emerged from the calls, 2 more suspicious deaths that the FBI was investigating, and dozens of women who'd had brief interactions with Carter, first dates, online conversations, preliminary relationship building, who'd broken things off for reasons they couldn't quite articulate. The ones who got away. You started an avalanche, Alexandra told me during an emergency meeting in her office. This is unprecedented. We're documenting a serial predator's entire career in real time. What happens now? Now? We build the most airtight case in criminal history. We make sure Carter Lawson becomes the cautionary tale that saves the next generation of women from men like him. But Carter wasn't going quietly. His attorney, a slick corporate lawyer named Robert Chen, held a press conference 3 days after the article published. "My client is a victim of a vindictive ex-wife's smear campaign," Chen said smoothly. "Yes, he made mistakes in his personal life. Yes, he had extramarital relationships. But fraud, murder, these are wild accusations from women who can't accept that their relationships ended." I watched the press conference from Margaret's apartment. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "He's going to claim we're all lying," Amanda said, "that we're bitter exes making up stories." "Let him," Margaret said calmly. "The evidence doesn't lie, and we have something he doesn't. What's that? Each other. He isolated us, kept us separate, made us believe we were alone. Now we're a united front. That's something he never planned for." She was right. The preliminary hearing 3 weeks later wasn't just attended by victims, it was attended by an army of survivors. All 7 confirmed fraud victims were there. Christine Park's mother and sister, Sarah Kay's entire family, representatives from the 3 women who'd died in earlier accidents, and nearly 30 women who'd had brief encounters with Carter, the ones who'd sensed something off and escaped. The courtroom was packed. Media filled every available seat. Carter, in an orange jumpsuit, looked small and diminished as he was led in. His eyes swept the gallery, registering the sheer number of women whose lives he'd touched. For the first time since I'd known him, Carter Lawson looked genuinely afraid. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. Agent Torres testified about the storage unit, the documentation, the pattern spanning 15 years. Forensic accountants detailed the money trail. Technology experts explained how Carter had used multiple aliases and fake credentials. Then Alexandra stood up. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to call our first witness." Ruby Thorne. I walked to the stand with my head high, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. And then I did. I told them about 14 years of marriage, about the 17 seconds of laughter that started my investigation, about finding the hotel charges and the Venmo payments, about Harold the doorman who'd documented Tuesday afternoons, about Margaret who'd taken photographs for 6 months. I described the night I changed the locks, the storage unit in Chicago, the bins with 5 names, the notebook with phases and exit strategies. "Ms. Thorne," Alexandra asked, "what did you think when you found the notebook entry about your father's death being convenient timing?" "I realized my father hadn't died of natural causes," I said clearly. "I realized Carter had been planning this for years, and I realized that if I hadn't found out when I did, I would be dead." Carter's attorney objected, claiming speculation. The judge overruled. "Ms. Thorne has a right to describe her state of mind and reasonable conclusions based on documented evidence." I continued testifying for 3 hours. By the end, several jury members were crying. One had to excuse herself, Amanda testified next, describing how Carter had convinced her he was divorced, how he'd maintained the illusion for 3 years, how he'd used their daughter as cover for his double life. Jennifer from Seattle testified about losing $50,000 and attempting suicide. Melissa, from Boston, testified about losing her home and her career one by one. We stood up and told our truths. Not bitter, not angry, just honest. By the end of the preliminary hearing, even Carter's attorney looked shaken. The judge set bail at $2 million cash, essentially ensuring Carter would remain in custody. This court finds substantial evidence of flight risk, danger to the community, and multiple serious charges with strong prosecution evidence. Defendant will remain incarcerated pending trial. As they led Carter away, he looked at me one last time, not with anger or defiance, but with something that might have been resignation. He'd finally realized he'd lost. The trial itself took 3 months. Carter's defense team tried everything, claiming the women were vindictive, suggesting the evidence was fabricated, even attempting to paint Carter as someone with relationship addiction, who made poor choices but wasn't a criminal. The jury didn't buy it. They heard from 12 victims. They saw the documentation from the storage unit. They reviewed the forged signatures, the fake insurance beneficiary forms, the emails planning his exit strategies. They learned about Christine Park's suspicious house fire and Sarah Kay's convenient brake failure, and the 3 other women who died in relationships with Carter's aliases. The prosecution couldn't prove murder beyond reasonable doubt yet, but they proved fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud. The jury deliberated for 7 hours. They returned with guilty verdicts on 43 of 45 counts. At sentencing, the judge looked at Carter with unconcealed disgust. "Mr. Lawson, you are a predator of the worst kind. You didn't target women for passion or even simple greed. You targeted them systematically, methodically, destroying lives with the same care most people use to plan a vacation." She sentenced him to 35 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for 25 years. Carter would be 76 years old before he could even apply for parole. As marshals led him away, he looked at the gallery one last time, at the sea of faces of women who'd survived him. And for just a moment, I saw something that might have been remorse, but it was too late for remorse. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Maria Santos helped coordinate so we could make a joint statement. I stood at the microphone with Amanda on one side and Jennifer on the other, the rest of our survivor group flanking us. "Today justice was served," I said, "but our work isn't done. Carter Lawson operated for 15 years because our society makes it easy for men like him to target women. Because we question victims instead of predators. Because we call it relationship drama instead of financial abuse." Amanda stepped forward. "We're establishing a foundation, the Survivors Alliance, to help victims of financial fraud in relationships, to provide legal resources, mental health support, and education about manipulation tactics. We're also working with law enforcement to create better protocols for investigating relationship fraud," Jennifer added, "so the next woman who walks into a police station with suspicions will be taken seriously." "Carter Lawson stole years from our lives," Melissa said. "But we're taking back the narrative. We're not victims anymore. We're survivors, and we're here to help the next woman who needs us." The press conference ended, but the work had just begun. 6 months after Carter's sentencing, I stood in my apartment, truly mine now, legally and emotionally, and looked out at the Minneapolis skyline. The Survivors Alliance had chapters in 12 cities. We'd helped 37 women escape financially abusive relationships. We'd worked with legislators in 3 states to create new laws around relationship fraud. Amanda had moved to Minneapolis with Lily. She lived 2 floors down from me, and we'd become the kind of friends that only shared trauma can create. Lily called me Aunt Ruby and didn't remember the man who'd claimed to be her father. Margaret had become my mentor and surrogate mother, filling the void my father's death had left. She volunteered with the Survivors Alliance, using her legal expertise to help women navigate divorce and fraud cases. Patricia Lawson had donated $100,000 to the foundation, half of what remained of her own inheritance, after Carter's debts were settled. She'd written me a letter with the check, "For the women my son hurt, and the women we might save." The criminal investigations into Christine Parks and Sarah Kay's deaths remained open. New evidence kept surfacing, witness statements, forensic reviews, financial trails that led back to Carter. Prosecutors were confident they could bring murder charges within the year. My consulting business had tripled in size. Companies wanted the strategic mind that could orchestrate such a complete reversal of power. The woman who changed her locks had become a different kind of legend. Not a victim's story, but a survivor's strategy. I dated occasionally, but cautiously. Trust was something I'd learned to guard carefully. Harold still worked the front desk, still called me Miss Thorne with pride. He'd become something of a building celebrity. The doorman who'd documented the evidence that helped bring down a serial predator. Diana the locksmith had become a friend. She taught self-defense classes through the Survivors Alliance, focusing on boundary setting and recognizing warning signs. And Maria Santos had won a Pulitzer Prize for her investigative series on relationship fraud, sparked by that first article about Carter. Life had moved forward, built on the foundation of what I'd survived, rather than being defined by it. On the anniversary of the night I changed my locks, I gathered everyone in my apartment, Amanda and Lily, Margaret, Marcus, Harold, Diana, Alexandra, Sarah from IT, and a dozen other women from the Survivors Alliance. Margaret raised a glass of champagne. To Ruby Thorne, who refused to disappear quietly. To all of us, I corrected. To every woman who's ever had to change her locks, literal or metaphorical. To the ones who survived and the ones who didn't. To second chances and hard-won wisdom. We toasted as the sun set over Minneapolis, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. Later, after everyone had left, I stood alone at my window with the new keys Diana had made me, solid, heavy, impossible to duplicate without my permission. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "My name is Rachel. I think my boyfriend might be doing to me what Carter Lawson did to you. I don't know where else to turn," I smiled, typing back immediately. "You're not alone. Let me help." Because that was the real revenge I'd realized. Not Carter rotting in prison, though that helped. Not the money we'd recovered or the laws we'd changed, or even the lives we'd saved, though all of that mattered. The real revenge was this: refusing to let him define me. Refusing to become small or scared or silent, taking everything he'd meant to destroy and transforming it into strength. Carter had tried to make me a victim. Instead, he'd created an army, and we were just getting started. Ruby's story proves that the best revenge isn't anger. It's precision. It's refusing to disappear. It's changing your own locks and taking back your life. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the 17 seconds? The storage unit discovery? Or Carter's face when he realized all his victims had found each other? Subscribe for more stories of courage, survival, and the kind of justice that changes everything. And remember, you're never as alone as you think you are.